Hey there, boys and girls. I got a question for you guys this week. Have you ever had a vehicle that no matter how many times you get behind the wheel, no matter how many times you drive down the same roads every day, you just can't help but fall in love with it every single time? Well, that's been kind of the case for me this week on the driveway, because I've been driving a car that hails from the mid-size luxury category, a car genre that I have loved for years on end. But now that I've driven this particular car for its 2021 model year, it doesn't quite stir my senses the exact same way. Why is that, and why do I even feel that way about a brand new car in the first place? Well, you'll find out all about that and more today on the driveway as we go for a spin and show you all around the brand new 2021 Lexus ES250 all-wheel drive. All right, boys and girls, so welcome to the new 2021 Lexus ES250 all-wheel drive. Now that sounds like a bit of a mouthful already, but we're not even done with this car because we have to tack on the term F-Sport onto the end of that. Now, not only is that title a mouthful, but I know what you guys are thinking. It's a Lexus, it's gonna be pricey. Well, I don't exactly know what your variation or terms of the word pricey include, but I know for this average Joe that doesn't make a whole lot of money and definitely couldn't afford something like this, but still gets the gracious opportunity from Lexus to even drive this car, yeah, it is a little bit pricey for me. And of course, I have the window sticker to prove it. So for this exact F-Sport all-wheel drive ES250, the starting MSRP is $45,700. But in this case, and this isn't even the most expensive one here, we have over $5,800 worth of options in this car. And I've had a look on Lexus's website. It does get more expensive than this. Now add in all that plus a $1,025 delivery processing and handling fee. And on this exact example here, we've got a sticker price of $52,605. Yeah, it is a little bit on the pricey side for just a simple mid-size car. But even though I was saying earlier that it doesn't quite have that same Lexus charm, I don't know, does it really? Well, there's one way to find out. Let's hit the start button and let's get this baby on the road. So I wanted to start off our drive today by talking about what is easily the most controversial part of this entire car as a whole, and that is its powertrain. Now, as I said before, we have a torque vectoring all-wheel drive system in this case, which I haven't really seen on an ES of any variety, both hybrid and the normal gas-powered ones. But what's even more interesting is instead of a big thirsty V6 under the hood, we now have essentially the same motor that you'd find in your mom's Camry. It's a 2.5-liter direct and port fuel injected, variable valve timing equipped 4-cylinder lump, making 203 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. Now it is connected to an 8-speed automatic transmission, which does mean that it gets a good bit better gas mileage. For the ES250 all-wheel drive running on regular unleaded gas instead of premium like Lexus's before, you'll be getting 25 miles per gallon in the city and 34 miles per gallon on the highway. However, don't expect to be winning any traffic light drag races either. 0 to 60 in this thing, 8.6 seconds. Top speed, 131 miles an hour. So aside from its more obscure powertrain, if you can call it that, at least in comparison to pretty much every Lexus that I've driven before, maybe with the exception of the LC500, and it's definitely not as big and brash as something like that. This car feels exactly like what you would expect from the Lexus brand through and through. To start with, even though I'm driving along at 65 miles an hour right now along the freeway, and the freeway surface isn't exactly the smoothest thing out there, the ride certainly is. And even though we have the F-Sport suspension underneath this car, I don't really feel a whole lot of the bumps. There's not much being communicated through the suspension into these Nulux leather-bound seats that I'm sitting in right now. It just feels as comfortable and as soft as you'd ever expect a Lexus to be. What's not so soft, and actually a pleasant surprise for me, is that with the all-wheel drive in this one, the steering actually feels a good bit heavier. It feels like it's got a good bit more heft to it. Like it's not as one finger on the steering wheel kind of turning that you might expect. And I really like that in a car. I don't want something that feels totally numb, like almost losing one of your senses in a way. I mean, yes, I know my hands are on the steering wheel and I know the car is going left or right, but I love the fact that as I drive along, I can feel all the communication from the suspension and everything through the steering wheel, and that is something that would definitely attract me to the all-wheel drive model here. So let's put our money where our mouth is now. Let's say we've got around $55,000 or so in the bank, and you want to buy yourself a car like this. 5 seats, all the luxury tech you could expect, and you want to get the most for your money. Would I say that the ES250 all-wheel drive, as it sits here, would be the best option for your money? Well, it kind of depends on what you like. If you like something more sporty, a little bit more hardcore, more of a driver's car, I wouldn't say this is it by any stretch of the imagination. First off, the engine definitely is not going to win you any drag races, as I said before. And although the steering is nice, it's nice and weighted, it's communicative, the ride is fantastic, I would say this car is a little bit more laid back. It's not lazy, but it is a bit more laid back in the way it feels to drive down the road. So if you want something that doesn't really urge you to floor it everywhere you go and doesn't make you feel like you're sitting in the driver's seat of a real sports sedan, I would say sure, the ES is a great example. And plus, you get the bulletproof Toyota reliability to go along with it. That 4-cylinder engine will last you hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles. And I guarantee you that this car, several years from now, when it's got 200,000 miles on it, will be clicking along just like any other Lexus you've ever driven. Now, aside from the powertrain and my complaints with it, there's one other area that I absolutely adore about this current gen ES. So let's find a nice little quiet spot up ahead and let's take a look at the inside and the out. Now, if someone were to come up to me and ask me what makes the perfect recipe for this new generation ES, guys, you're looking at it right here. I've always felt that things like what trim level you get this car in and also what color you get it in definitely can make or break this car. But sitting here now in the optional ultra white exterior with the F-Sport package, this is exactly how I would dream up one of these cars if I were to be in the market for one. But I have to give the F-Sport package the most credit, not just the paintwork. The paintwork's gorgeous, but these blacked out headlights here, how it nicely contrasts with the brightness of the white color. These are the optional premium triple beam headlights. I love these. Auto leveling and adjusting, auto high beam assist equipped, and the auto side light assist equipped as well. You also have the L-shaped daytime running lights going across the bottom, and your turn signals are this little yellow strip running up through the middle of the light itself. Now, of course, we have things like the intuitive park assist, so you have the sensors lining both the front and rear of the vehicle. And before we get to what is kind of my least or most favorite part of the car with the grille, I have to give mention to these right here. Now, on some Lexus cars, I've noticed that they've put little air skirts here inside kind of the inner part of these little front fender pieces here. However, on this car, these are actually fake. They don't go anywhere. There's no hole right in front of the front wheels. These are just purely here for show, but of course they are painted in a nice metallic black, so I can't give too much grief to that. What I can give a little grief to, though, is of course the corporate designed spindle grille. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, on certain Lexus cars, I think it looks fantastic. On the LC500 that we reviewed last week, it looked absolutely fantastic. And I love sort of this area up here, how it kind of goes up into the front bumper just a little bit higher. But then as you go down towards the bottom, it looks like a giant giant mouth opening up that's about to eat you. It is just, I don't know, it's a little different for me, and it's not as open as you might think. There is a huge partition or divider right about here, about that size. So you've got an air intake up here and a little bit of air intake down here at the bottom, but you don't exactly have the greatest airflow going across through the middle. Now, of course, here at the front, we also have the shrouded in Lexus badge. Of course, this has all the safety features you could want with the Lexus Safety System Plus. And of course, that means you get things like the dynamic speed radar cruise control and the forward collision warning. Now, of course, you can't have a beautiful body like this ES has without having some serious eye candy to roll on as well. Underneath here, we have 19 by 8 inch F-Sport specific aluminum alloy wheels wrapped in 235/40 series Michelin tires. And I gotta tell you guys, if these wheels were any darker of a shade, I'm not sure that I would like them as much, but here with this kind of medium smoke gray finish or so, contrasting beautifully with the ultra white paintwork, I really love the way these wheels set this car off. Now, even though the ES is by far and away not the biggest mid-size car you're going to find on the market at just under 196 inches from nose to tail, I got to tell you guys, I love the silhouette of this car. I love how really from kind of the middle of the car back, how it slopes down and trails off into that little ducktail spoiler here, accented by an additional spoiler thanks to the F-Sport package on this car. But again, whereas the front looked like someone just took an LS sedan and shrunk it down, the profile of this car suggests anything but. Now, here down the side, again, it's a lot of typical Lexus features. First of all, you got to have the mandatory F-Sport badges on the fender. There's also one on the rear trunk lid. Of course, the mirrors here on the outside, body color on the bottom, gloss black across the top, LED turn signal in the middle with a nice little lashing of chrome. As you can see, they are folded in right now because the vehicle is currently locked, which brings me to the standard Lexus Smart Key Access System. Of course, you do have all the functions, lock, unlock, release the power operated trunk on this one, as well as panic and the manually releasable key blade out of the bottom of the key. Now, since the car is locked at the moment, you can just reach up to the handle with the key on you. You grab the handle. As you can see, the mirrors will automatically fold out. You can get in, do whatever you need to, but when you want to get out and lock the car, just have the key on you and tap the little ridged area along the front edge of the handle. Now, in comparison to the sort of sharp angles and more aggressive nature that you might get from the front of this car, when you look at the back of it, F-Sport or not, I love things like how the rear of the ES has this almost fluid approach to it. It's more of an elegant personality, if you will. Things like the shallow angle of the rear glass, how it trails off almost seamlessly into the rear trunk area, or as the people across the pond call it, the boot. But either way, we also have a nice little trunk spoiler extension on this one. Again, thanks to that F-Sport trim, which there's the other badge, just for people who are wondering. But everything else back here is pretty much rudimentary Lexus, with the exception of a couple things. We have almost full LED taillights here, so LED reverse lights, LED triple bar taillights, but we do have the incandescent turn signals on this one. We do, of course, have things like government mandated backup camera, of course, your typical Lexus badging, rudimentary again, and the rear half of that intuitive park assist that I was mentioning before. However, we're not done at the back of this car just yet. Oh no, you guys heard me say earlier that this car does have a power assisted trunk. Now, that's not the only thing we'll find here at the back. This car actually has a hands-free trunk access. So I have the key in my hand right here. I just kick my foot somewhere around the center of the car. Now, of course, as a mid-size Lexus, you're not going to get the biggest trunk in the world. However, there is still quite a lot of space to be had here in the back of this car. First of all, the one thing of note is that the rear seats are not split fold. You only have a little bitty pass-through right there, kind of in the middle of the seats. You just fold down the rear armrest and you'd have access to that. But overall, just on paper here in the trunk, you have 13.8 cubic feet of cargo space. Now, I've had a lot of stuff back here during the week that we've had this car. I've had a couple travel bags. I tried fitting some suitcases in here. I was able to fit 3 full-size suitcases back here and still have enough room for a couple of backpacks, say along the sides right there. Now, you can lift up the trunk mat underneath and you'll be pleased to find there's no spare tire kit in here, or at least a fix-a-flat. You do actually have a spare tire hidden underneath this little cargo section here with all of your tools aboard. And then of course, when it comes to closing the trunk, you can do it a couple different ways. You can push the button and do it the power operated way, or you could just grab the trunk as normal and shut it like there was no power assistance at all. Now, if you guys thought the outside of the F-Sport ES was sporty, then wait until you guys see the inside. Now, one thing to note before I open the door, the F-Sport usually has only 2 interior color options. You can either opt for a solid black interior, or if you really want to go sporty and crazy, you can have what I have on this car. You guys are seeing it. This is the circuit red and black Nulux leather upholstered interior. And guys, all I can say is just wow. Holy smokes. You need a pair of sunglasses to look at these seats. That is a bright, vivid red. Now, there is no Alcantara on these seats here. These little black parts are still part of the leather upholstered trim, so they are full leather bound seats for both the front occupants and of course your folks in the back. These seats are a little bit more aggressively bolstered thanks to the F-Sport trim, and of course they are heated and ventilated for both the front occupants as well. Not to mention, both the front seats are full power adjustable with 2-way lumbar for both sides. Also, of course, the driver's seat does have a 3-person memory setting here on the door, not to mention all of your powered conveniences as well. You have the ability to manually fold the mirrors in, leave them automatic or leave them out all the time. You have the separate mirror controls, locks, window locks, and of course, all 4 automatic windows. And all of this is surrounded by just leather aplenty, not to mention the Handori aluminum trim here across the top of the door. There's a little bit here across the top of the dash. I mean, this stuff just looks absolutely exquisite. Now, the top of the door, it is a little bit harder, same with some of the material here, but on like the key touch points, like the armrest here, it is nothing but soft, supple leather. Now, also quickly looking at the inside, a few other things may seem familiar, like the partially perforated F-Sport specific steering wheel, of course, with the paddle shifters on the back, the F-Sport badge down there at the bottom, and then of course the red stitching around the middle. And of course you have a couple of other Lexus touches, things like the little nodules on the top of the upper part of the gauge cluster here. So the one on the right controls the drive mode select, and the one on the left controls your traction control. Now, as I mentioned to you guys on the drive, first off, sitting here in the driver's seat, it is a very, very comfortable place to be in here. Not only are the seats hugging me in all the right places, they're not pinching my back in any ways, but just look at the visibility in here. That windshield is huge, and not to mention I have excellent visibility for a full 360 degrees. But also, being a Lexus, there are buttons aplenty in here, starting with the ones on the steering wheel. Of course, you have the majority of the functions, if not all of them, for the dynamic all-speed radar cruise control. Of course, that does include the distance sensor up here just to the left of that. You also have the lane keep assist with the active steering assist as well, not to mention a couple of radio and media functions, so seek track. You have the radio mode button. You also have your voice recognition, hands-free Bluetooth, and volume control. And then you get to the arrow pad and separate button, which control the majority of the thin film transistor display that comprises your gauge cluster. So the up and down and left and right arrows allow you to cycle through different menus within the gauge cluster itself. But then if I can pan in just a little bit, I press this upper button on the steering wheel, and you watch as the gauge cluster actually scoots over a little bit, revealing a slightly larger screen over here on the left with all of pretty much the same functions. You can go through different trip meters, you could see your active economy, so on and so forth. Below the steering column itself, of course, we do have the power control for the tilting and telescoping here. That's this little nodule on the side of the steering column. And then all the way over to the left here, there's really not many buttons at all. The only one I can see just up top is the different information button for the optional heads-up display, which is pretty much not even visible. It's way up there at the top of the dash. That is a 10+ inch heads-up display up there, and it is very bright, especially when you're driving around at night. But to be honest with you, I barely even notice it when I'm driving. I'm usually looking a little further ahead. If you look way down underneath here, you actually have a little change drawer that pops out right here. It's definitely not big enough for most wallets and definitely most phones, but nice to keep maybe your spare change around. And then way down underneath, you have the button to release the trunk, and also on the left, the button to release the fuel door. Now, if you guys thought the infotainment system in that LC500 I reviewed last time was wild, take a look at what's inside of the ES here. First of all, we have the navigation package as an additional option on this car, and what it gives you is a 12.3-inch multifunction display. Of course, it comes with things like Lexus Dynamic Navigation, Amazon Alexa, Android Auto, and Apple CarPlay compatibility, along with smartwatch compatibility as well, and it has pretty much all the functions of every Lexus system that I've worked with before. It also is controlled as before with the Lexus remote touch interface. I'm not even going to go into how much I really don't like that at all, but it has all the selections across the bottom: destination, audio, Bluetooth telephone, the Lexus Inform app suite, of course the projection setting, that's what gives you your Amazon Alexa, Android, and Apple settings. Of course, you have things like general information and setup, and of course you can go into the climate zone system as well if you want to play around with that, like things like your heated seats, heated steering wheel, all that good stuff. But the good news is I don't have to go into the climate control setup in this one in order to access things like the heated seats, heated steering wheel, and all that stuff. Those buttons are actually located down here just underneath the controls for the climate control. Now, even though this car has the navigation package in it, unfortunately, we are missing the premium package on this car, which would give it the upgraded Mark Levinson audio system. You guys know I'm a huge audiophile with these kinds of cars, but without Mark Levinson, it's not too bad. You have a Lexus branded 10-speaker premium audio system as well, and handily, they have included the volume and tuning knob up here on the dash instead of down here by the remote touch interface scroll pad. So let's push the button and see what we get. So aside from my favorite button up here in the middle of the console, which sends me on a one-way ticket to Bass and Music Town, and its little musical sidekick buttons like radio, media, and seek track functions, just above that is the setup for the dual zone automatic climate control. Now, some of the features in this can be a little bit interesting. Like, for example, the temperature scroll wheels are super tiny. Kind of wish they were maybe a little bit bigger, but of course they are accented either side by these little LCD screens. And of course, don't worry about the flicker, that's just a trick of the camera. But what's a little bit bigger are the buttons for the main control. So you have automatic air conditioning, turning the system off, fan speed, lower and higher. Of course, your different climate zones, including front defrost in the middle. You have front and rear defrost separately, along with the heated exterior mirrors on the rear defrost button, as well as where you want the air directed, such as being recycled, automatic, or even pulling the air in from outside. You come down underneath, and it is a little bit of a slew of buttons down here, but you have the ventilated seats and heated seats. You can have those set automatically, going into the climate zone settings or the climate controls in the Lexus remote touch interface. This car does have the optional F-Sport specific heated steering wheel, so that's this little button right here. You do also have a button that controls the power rear sunshade. So if I just spin around, look out the back, one press of the button, got a nice little power shade that rises up across the rear window. Now, just in front of that, however, if you actually look at what appears to be a cup holder, there's actually only one cup holder here. As you can see, I got the key to this car plus my house keys in it. We also do have two USB ports down here. I've got them both occupied at the moment. And of course, an auxiliary input down here just to the left of that. The rest of the center console, however, houses things like, again, the scroll wheel and a couple of buttons for the remote touch interface. So you have the map button, the various menu options, and the back button, along with the scroll pad itself. But just to the left of that is a very beautifully sculpted shift selector for the 8-speed direct shift automatic transmission. Now, it does come with a backup camera and automatic door lock, so I put it in reverse. You hear the doors automatically lock, and you see up top we have the backup camera in place. Now, I have the wheel turned at the moment, so you can see it does have the turn assisted guidance lines on it as well. And of course, this does go in part with the intuitive park assist, and you can also switch between a wide angle view and something a little more focused if you so desire. Of course, it also does have the manual mode in it. You can flip it to the side and just leave it in sport, or you can push up to go up a gear, pull back to go down a gear, or if you're like me, I would be using the paddles up here on the steering wheel as well. This car also does have an automatic brake hold in it, so of course push that. Once the vehicle comes to a complete stop, you can actually take your foot off the brake, and that will hold the car in place until you actually put your foot on the accelerator, in which it releases, and then you can drive off again. You also do have a separate little cubby hole in here, which I actually really like, but you notice this tab says push. Let's say, I don't know, that's a little deep for you. You don't want your drink sitting way down in there. You push this little tab, and suddenly you have kind of a second little floor that raises up, and suddenly you can set your bottle of water in there or whatever, and it'll be sitting at a little bit more of an accessible reach. The center console, however, right here, again, also wrapped in that circuit red leather. Absolutely love that. And it opens actually from both sides. So I can open it from my side, in which I reveal the optional wireless charger that I have in this car in a rather sizable center console. But let's say, I don't know, my girlfriend's riding shotgun with me. She can actually open it from her side as well, using basically the same function that I have over here. Of course, sitting up here in the front and looking upwards, you do have the touch-sensitive LED map lights for both sides. Of course, also, if you want to turn on the main lights in the vehicle, this touch-sensitive pad in the middle turns on not only the front lights, but also the ones in the rear. Of course, you also do have the button to turn on or off the lights when the doors are open. And then, of course, aside that, you also have the touch controls for the sunroof. The one over here on the right opens it completely, and this one on the left just only does the tilt function. So we can slide it open, push the open button with a quick push, and now, even for someone like myself at over 6 feet tall, getting into the back of and actually getting comfortable in this ES is really not a chore at all. I do have to step down a bit, and I do have to duck my head because of the slope of the rear part of this car, but you close the door, and suddenly you actually have quite a bit of room back here. Now, like I said, I'm over 6 feet. I'm 6'1" to be specific. And I have this seat in the memory setting where I have it if I'm actually driving. Now, I do have map pockets here in the back of both seats. I have two USB chargers located at the base of the center console, along with one 12-volt 120-watt outlet. And although I have a lot of room up in the front, especially with this one having that small little sunroof up in the front as well, here in the back, you have just as much room as well. You have a nice indented headliner. You do have a couple of LED map lights up here on top. And then, of course, the one in the middle turns on when the driver decides it's time to turn the rear lights on. In the center console here, of course, these seats are not 60-40 split, but you do have a couple of nice little cup holders, which are quite bright, might I add. I would have expected maybe the cup holder inside to be black, but instead they've color matched it to the circuit red leather that we have in this car. You also notice there is that little door for the pass-through that you saw in the cargo area earlier, and it's really only big enough for maybe like skis or something like that, maybe even small little long boards. But other than that, I wouldn't be recommending fitting too many big objects through the back of the seat back here. Well, everyone, that wraps up our review and drive of the 2021 Lexus ES250 all-wheel drive F-Sport. If you like this video, or perhaps you learned something today, please leave a thumbs up down below. And also, while you're at it, hit that subscribe button down there as well, because trust me, it benefits the both of us in the end. At the end of the day, however, another shout out, and a big one at that, goes to my friends at Lexus USA for providing another wonderful vehicle for a solid week of driving around. But in the end, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review, and I will see y'all next time. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.